All right, all right, all right, all right. Let's dive into it. So I want to hear from you guys. We're going to explore a new technique tonight. But before we unpack that, I'm curious to hear about how everyone's week was. Since last we spoke, your assignment was to bring the practice into life through the background practice and micro hits. And I want to know how that went. If anyone would care to share. Mr. Jackson Harding.
Hey, the C practice. So I was practicing the see, hear, feel while driving. And I've
Mm-hmm.
also been reading the book you recommended, Shinzen's Science of Enlightenment. And he talks a little bit about the different kinds of adjustments that the eyes make all throughout the day. And the
Mm-hmm.
C practice has been something I've had the most difficulty with over the last several months. I've been, working with some of these, and it was interesting after reading that how much like the visual field shifts, like especially driving, look in the rear view mirror, see a car over there, there's someone crossing, like it's just constant.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of and then that's when things started getting trippy, right? How weird, like how weird all this stuff just kind of arising and going away in each moment.
Mm.
So that was my experience.
Very cool, man. Starting to taste a little bit of the psychedelic nature of meditation practice.
Mm.
Right on. It makes the drive more interesting. Very cool. Thanks for sharing. Anyone else have anything? Anything at all? Question, insight, epiphany, observation? Richard.
Yeah, did the feel and rest during my workout this past week.
Nice.
Like feeling me push the weights, and then as I came back down on my sets, resting, rest, feel that. I seem to concentrate more on my workout too by doing that.
Wow. So you're telling me that you were doing feel rest with every rep? You would feel, and then
Yes.
on the concentric you would rest. Very cool, man. Yeah, and that not only is strengthening your muscles of clarity, concentration, and equanimity, but it's strengthening your actual muscles because you're
Yes.
engaged in your workout. You're actually there. You're not listening to a podcast or daydreaming. You're in your body. Very cool, man.
Right.
Very cool. That had never occurred to me, and I'm going to do that. Thanks for sharing that, Cara.
Hello. Yeah, I particularly enjoyed it as well while I was exercising. Doing gym work is a new activity for me, and I've always found it quite overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
The lights and the equipment and other people around, but the process of focusing on the muscles and feeling into the body, and then movement, and then having a restful mind or a attitude and focus was really good for me. I felt like I had like a bit of a breakthrough, and it made my gym work a lot better, but it also made me just be able to immerse myself in the experience with so much more rest and ease. It was really cool.
Very cool. And maybe even finding a little bit of rest and ease in the strenuous moments of the workout.
Absolutely. Whereas in the past, I would have really pushed that or exerted myself. I was just allowing myself to move and then experience. It felt like it made everything better.
Yeah, very cool. I can remember a time in my life years ago where my idea of a workout was taking like 3 times the recommended dose of a pre-workout supplement and smoking a bowl of marijuana and then going to the gym and just being completely disconnected from my body in every way, shape, or form. And it's much more useful, I find, to actually be there for your workout. And why not turn it into a meditation? So
Yeah.
I'm glad you guys found that for yourselves. Anyone else? Shamin.
Yeah, I've been mostly focusing on feeling, especially while walking down, and I sort of became super aware of the moments I'm closing down. Certain feeling just makes me close down, and then I, I realize, oh my God, I am closing down, and I feel a punch in my body.
Mm,
Then it's a feeling, and just to see how it feels the past few days. So yeah, that has been revealing.
mm. So it sounds like you've been turning toward difficult moments.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is a useful strategy. We can turn toward the difficult moments, or we can use the practice to back off the difficult moments. Both are useful, and both have both are appropriate in moments. And if you feel strong enough in your practice right now that what you're called to do is really soak into the challenges in life, emotional challenges in life, by all means, the only way out is through. So good for you.
Thank you.
And just for everyone, as you develop these skills and you have the capacity to really be all the way here for what's happening, sometimes the practice can be overwhelming. So we're going to get next week to a different technique about cultivating positivity. And that can be a very useful skill to have. Sometimes, like I said, the phrase that my teacher uses is we need to know when to bear down and we need to know when to back off. Shamim has reported that he's feeling the call to bear down, and that's good, and I encourage you to do that. But if at any point you're starting to feel a little too raw or the practice is getting a little too real, you can always back off. You know, our practice is our responsibility, so really this is about self-care.
What do you mean by backing off? Like, do you mean
Well, I'll turn the question back to you. You reported that you focused a lot on feel and you were feeling closure. Could you be a little more specific about what you mean with closure, if you could describe it as an emotional sensation?
um, it was meaning like there was certain thoughts in my head throughout the day because of some events in my life,
Mm-hmm.
and the feeling was not that good. And then I focused on the feeling just for the sake of practice.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I was just in the feeling, like, okay, I'm this feeling, and that kind of stopped the spiral of thoughts of judgment and self-abuse and other things. I'm just in the feeling and just continuing my day.
Right. And so what if you could describe the feeling with a word? Anger, fear, sadness, disgust, shame. What was the feeling?
It was sadness and frustration.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So bearing down would be soaking in and really becoming absorbed by that feeling of sadness and frustration, becoming very curious about it. Where is it in my body? Is it getting more intense or less intense? This would be bearing down. A backing off strategy would be, okay, actually, I'm at the end of my line here and I'm feeling pretty maxed out. So a different strategy would be, okay, maybe I'm just going to focus my attention outward for now. I'm going to soak into external auditory sound. Just listen out and focus away from this fear and sadness, or I'm sorry, you said fear and
frustration
that I'm feeling, or sadness and frustration that I'm feeling, and just let that play out in the background. But I can't really go there right now. So there's a rhythm of practice. Sometimes we dive into it, sometimes we back away from it. But we're choosing what to do. We're not just running on autopilot, not even aware of what's happening. We're making a decision. And the practice of mindfulness is providing that decision where before there was only reactivity. Makes sense? Thank you, Shamim. Jimmy, do you like to be called Jimmy or James? Oh, let me unmute you. I think my lip reading skills, you said Jimmy. All right, let me hear it. All right.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay? Because it's the mother's wild today in Australia.
Yeah, we can hear you. It's a little windy though.
Yeah, she's wild.
Actually, James, I'm sorry, I got to pause you. We're getting quite a bit of wind. Can't really hear you.
Yeah, probably difficult. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, but it's very uncomfortable with all the wind. Would it be possible for you to type your question?
Probably not. Yeah, it's difficult.
All right, let's see if as the class goes on, if the wind dies down. If not, you can shoot me an email.
Yeah, cool.
Okay, sorry about that. Anyone else have anything they'd like to share before we dive into the new technique? All right. So tonight we're going to be learning a technique called feel flow. Jackson shared earlier that he was actually beginning to perceive what we would call in this system flow in the visual field. So flow, right off the bat, we should all understand that this is not something esoteric or weird or supernatural. It's very simply just the quality of movement that is available within the sensory experience all the time. By another name, we could call it impermanence. So we're actually learning to sensitize our mind and train our attention to perceive the very subtle, impermanent quality of every sensory arising. So you may have heard flow or flow state before. This is not what we're talking about here. Flow state, as it exists in pop culture, is more like a psychological mind state, like in meditation lingo, we might call that absorption. So flow state in pop culture is being highly concentrated on a given task and feeling highly efficient due to that high state of concentration. But the flow that we're discussing this evening is more a perceptual experience. So I think I mentioned 2 weeks ago when we were doing the feel rest technique, I think this line came up. It's one thing to philosophically or intellectually say this too shall pass when dealing with a difficult moment. But it's another thing to have the direct perceptual experience that this too is passing. That moment by moment, everything that you're aware of is kind of arising and passing constantly. It's reality is painted with this flavor of flow that is so ever present that we stop even noticing it. So this is kind of a foray into a bit more of the psychedelic side of meditation practice. I am a tripper, so I really like the psychedelic side of meditation practice. Usually it's very subtle at first, the state of flow. But one of the phrases that I can hear my teacher's voice saying right now is subtle is significant. So what I really wanted to drive home for you guys is it's not a supernatural state. It's really just any detection of movement. So we're learning how to just really soak into the moment and become aware and perceive the subtle arising and passing that is happening all the time. And we're going to, this evening, we're going to restrict our range of focus just to feel. So we're going to be endeavoring to detect flow in feel space. Feel space would be physical sensation or any emotional sensation. Why do this? So it's very interesting for one. It's the flavor of flow can have an effervescent quality to it that can be very pleasant. And also it's very liberating. I would say that the two most profound insights that this practice has given me thus far is one, preventing the mind from generating afflictive emotions. Two is noticing the moment when a difficult emotion passes. So it's very easy for us to detect the arising of a frustration or a fear or a sadness, because our minds are built to detect what is uncomfortable, because that has more of an impact on our survival. So it's very important that we notice the arising of something uncomfortable. It's very difficult to miss that. It doesn't take a lot of training to notice that. It does take training, however, to notice that the arisings of those difficult, say, emotions, they come, they waver in their intensity, they dance for a little, and then they pass. But if we're not training the mind to notice the passing, if we're not practicing the skill of clarity, then our brains kind of gloss over and create this imagined continuity of, let's say, a difficult day, when in reality it was one day that had a few spikes of emotional challenge. But we just weren't clear enough to notice that as they came, so too they went. But we didn't notice the passing. So in that way, this is very liberating. As we, it's almost, you could think of it as a loosening our grip on our perception and allowing for a more unfixated feeling of self to emerge. That's a clunky sentence. I'm trying to, well, here's a phrase that my teacher uses that maybe you'll find useful. It's the shifting of a particle, being a particle, to being a wave. So without training, it feels like the self experience is very small and tight and compact and solid. But as we train and as we cultivate these skills, we start to feel this wave-like quality of the self experience. And we start to notice that there's nothing really solid happening here. And actually, there's quite a bit of movement that's happening all the time. But our brains just kind of gloss over all that and paint this picture of a very solid and separate self. And learning to detect this quality of flow somatically is the first step toward a more liberated perception of oneself and the world, really. So like I said, flow, this quality of flow, it's just movement, it's just impermanence, arising and passing. It's always there. We're just now training our minds to notice it. Flow exists in the visual field. It exists in hear space. It exists in feel space. It exists in active moments of sensory activation, and it exists in restful states. This evening, we're going to restrict our area of focus just to feel, and our practice will be to notice flow, if possible. You know, I can remember when I was a youngster, I wonder if you remember this, Jackson, you're about my age, Isaac maybe. There was like this boom in what they called 5D books or something. It was like 3D, but you didn't need glasses, but you had to bring the book really close to your face and then like slowly pull the book away from your face and look at it in just the right way, and then the image would kind of pop off of the page. Does anyone remember this, or am I all alone here? Okay, cool. So I remember having one of those books when I was little, and just like laying awake in bed at night and trying to read the instructions. And I remember like even crossing my eyes, I'm not seeing it, and I just feel like there's nothing here, nothing here. And it took a lot of practice for me to actually see it. But I remember the moment I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. But I think it was like a week or 2 weeks of practice before the image actually jumped off the page. So we have to allow ourselves to kind of grope and grasp in the dark a little bit. Or maybe not. I mean, who knows? Maybe you have a very rich experience of flow right off the bat. But if you don't, know that that's completely normal. It's par for the course. We're inviting a latent sensing capacity back online that has been forgotten. But with practice and continued effort, you can soak into it. If your not feeling it or not able to perceive it this evening, then you're still cultivating your skills of concentration just by endeavoring to notice it, just by preventing the mind from wandering off into some daydream, memory, planning, fantasy. Just by focusing on the task at hand, you're becoming a better meditator, you're strengthening your concentration, and you're strengthening your muscle of equanimity, because you're just available for whatever happens. If it's just kind of a boring sit and nothing really moves you, okay, that's the way it went this evening. If it's very rich, okay, that's the way it went this evening. Remember, the good meditations are the ones that you do, the bad ones are the ones that you skip. That's as specific as we get. So we're always cultivating those three primary skills: concentration, clarity, and equanimity, regardless of what happens in the practice. I just want to check my notes, see if I covered all the bases. Does anyone have any questions for me before we dive into the practice? Clara?
Yeah, so perhaps what I need to do is just clarify a little bit, because I like the visual metaphor of in Australia we call them magic eyes, those 5D images.
Cool.
Yeah, but it's interesting that you use like a visual metaphor to describe something that where we so where the feel space is, I guess this is my understanding, is that we notice when something arises and we cultivate that practice of equanimity, of not becoming too attached to it, perceiving it, and then noticing when it passes. Yeah? Is that what I should be?
Yes, we're focusing on the arising and passing.
Cool.
And just trying to soak into that subtle, impermanent, flowy characteristic that is really at the core of the entire sensing experience.
Awesome. Okay.
And
excellent.
remember, yes, and a great question. I'm glad to clear that up. Remember, it's not esoteric. It's not that weird. It could be very simple, like you notice that an itch shows up on your forearm and then it disappears. Okay, that's flow. Something happened and then it went away.
Yeah.
It could be just very basic, very mundane. But then as we start to soak into the mundane, it becomes more and more interesting. Just like with our feel rest practice, we had that positive feedback loop. The more that we were able to notice the subtle restful quality and concentrate on it, the stronger our concentration got. The stronger our concentration gets, the more available that quality of rest is available to us. So one influences the other. It's the same with our practice this evening, feel flow. So concentrating on it will strengthen your concentration and actually heighten the experience of flow. Anyone else? Adam, please.
Yeah, about a week or so ago, I was coming back from a meditation, and essentially I started feeling really sad. Started judging the sadness, and then I witnessed in real time, slowed down, just completely witnessed myself attach the story and project that emotion onto a past situation. And as I witnessed it and saw it, I was able to then kind of reverse it and just sit with the emotion, and it completely dissipated. It was one of the most powerful experiences I've ever had, of how I essentially just completely project whatever emotion is up in me onto a person or situation, and then that will then lead into like a thought loop, and not, just on and on. So
wow,
it was massive.
Yeah, that's a massive insight. That's the radical turning toward a difficult moment without needing it to be different, with complete clarity and equanimity, allowing it to be the way it is and watching it pass. That's the practice, my man. Good job. Good. Thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful. And so these are the little nuggets that the practice gives us. We start to watch the practice bear fruit, and then we're motivated to keep going. So The deeper our practice gets, the more motivated, the less discipline it takes to sit, because we start to actually know and feel that, holy shit, this stuff works. Simple, but very significant. So Adam brings up a great point. One thing I do want to mention before we dive into this that I wanted to mention and I forgot, so thank you for reminding me, is this concept of recycling the reaction. So Adam, he was out for a walk, I think, and he notices this feeling come up and there's a reaction to it. But in a moment of clarity, he was able to recycle the reaction through the practice of see, hear, feel. So here we are sitting on our cushion, we're doing feel flow. Tonight we're doing feel flow, and you're able to detect some frustration in a moment, and the internal mental talk is, man, I don't like this technique, this ain't working for me, I'm no good at this. So the concept of recycling the reaction is just churning that reaction right through the wood chipper of see, hear, feel. So the frustration arises, feel in. The I'm no good at this, blah, 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 internal mental talk. So it's like the game whack-a-mole. You're sitting there with your see, hear, feel mallet, and every time a sensory rising comes up, you just bust it. You don't let anything coagulate. You remain unfixated. Okay? You stay radically in the present moment without, like Adam said, taking himself away from the experience of sadness, projecting it on some old thing that happened, and then just spiraling out into who knows where. We just stay in the moment by recycling the reaction. Make sense? All right, very cool. So I can ramble on forever, but this is a meditation class, so what do you say we do some practice? Yeah? All right, so let's everyone find a comfortable position and just go ahead and straighten the spine. Do whatever you have to do to get into your meditative posture. And it's always a good idea to check in with the body, just scan for any tension. Relax the brow, just relax the whole face. And press the tongue to the roof of the mouth. You have the option to close your eyes. You could leave the eyes half open. You could leave the eyes open. I prefer to close my eyes. And so let's just begin with a little warm up here for our concentration, clarity, and equanimity. And we'll start with the see, hear, feel practice for a few minutes. So this is a technique that you know well, so I'll just leave you to it. Beginning with our standard see, hear, feel technique. You may notice that the mind is very active. If that's the case, then that's totally okay. Just let that be the way it is, and no internal mental talk. Remember, anything at all that is happening is grist for the mill. Opportunity to practice. So now, having established a base level of concentration, it's going to let the see and hear categories just play out in the background. We're going to narrow our focus now to physical sensation, feel space, internal emotional sensation and external physical sensation. And just trying to detect that subtle quality of movement. I find it useful to use the internal labels just to prevent the mind from wandering into thought. So the labels that we use are just feel and flow. Feel just serving as a metronome to keep the mind and your attention grounded in the body, and flow to label any movement, impermanence, arising, passing quality that you're able to detect. A very reliable and constant physiological flow experience is the breath, the arising and passing of each inhale and exhale. You may choose to soak into that sensation for a little while and just feel its flow, feel the movement. You may choose to focus globally on the body, just taking the entirety of the body in at once. You might want to zoom in on one specific body part, one specific area of the body. You have the option also to just allow your attention to freely float about the body. Just follow what seems interesting. If you are able to find some quality of flow, you could notice it for a moment, let it go, or you could just really soak into it, allowing the movement, allowing the flow to just massage your awareness. If this quality of flow seems elusive, just find some physical sensation and soak into it. The qualities you can detect are the intensity, the pressure, speed. Just notice if any of those qualities seem to be shifting. This practice of feeling flow can turn physical discomfort into an opportunity for insight. If there are any nagging aches and pains in the sitting practice, there's an opportunity to soak really deeply in and find the subtle movement therein. Feel flow. Remember that subtle is significant, and remember to recycle the reaction. If you're using the breath as an anchor to the experience of flow, you may perceive a subtle expansive quality with the exhale and a contractive quality with the inhale. You may notice a sinking sensation with every exhale and a subtle rising sensation with every inhale. Just soak into those movements of the breath. Allow them to become global sensations. Feel flow. And in a moment, we'll conclude this period of formal practice. And when we do, I would encourage you to choose a background practice that you can maintain while we enter a period of discussion and Q&A. Shifting now from the formal practice to the background practice. Letting go of this technique and any technique whatsoever. And just for a moment, allowing the mind to abide in this open, expansive state. Nothing to do. And when you're ready, you can allow your eyes to open. So, how did that go? Rod?
Yeah, it was it was interesting. Like I felt it really easy to recognize
the sensation arising, almost the starting point, the midpoint, and the peak part, but then very hard to distinguish the disappearance, the going, like the flow part. Like my brain almost made no connection to the capacity to recognize that moment ending. And like it felt just totally unused, like there was no capacity there. But there was something beautiful about noticing the passing. It stopped my mind wanting to create that link, to create the afflictive emotion to come back. It was almost like it gave it some kind of distinct, like almost like, well, that part's done, it could let it go. Yeah, and there was a sense of almost freedom or liberation in that. There was something, yeah, distinctly freeing that I felt.
Are you speaking with regard to the physical sensation or more emotional sensation?
Emotional sensation, sorry.
Okay, yeah, very good. So it sounds like you're getting pretty clear on the intensity, the duration, the moment of arising, and starting to feel the dissipation.
Yeah, the dissipation was really hard to notice. I could sort of sense the peak, and then I think, oh, is it going? And then it was just gone. Like it was almost like I could notice the gone, I could notice the peak, but not the gap in between. Whereas it was much more easy to notice the distinction in the arising of the sensation.
to me, Rod, that sounds very clear, and the nature of emotional sensory experience or even physical sensory experience can be that it disappears rather quickly. So it might just vanish really quickly. It may be that you didn't really miss anything. You just noticed that all of a sudden it's gone.
Yeah, the going was fast. It seemed significantly faster than the arising.
So you're speaking to what I mentioned earlier, and I think now you have the direct experience, which is an insight, that it's really difficult to miss the arising of the emotion, especially an afflictive emotion. But it takes a little more practice to notice the fact that it's gone. And if we're not noticing that, then we create this illusory continuity of anger, fear, sadness, whatever. And we can tell ourselves that you had a hard day, but you didn't have a hard day. You couldn't possibly. You may have had a boring day or a neutral day with some arisings of difficult moments, but they didn't last because nothing lasts. And this practice that we're engaged in this evening is an insight into this impermanence. Nothing lasts. There's nothing really stable here. It's constant rising, passing, expansion, contraction. And it's one thing to read that in a book or, say this too shall pass. But it's another thing to actually have the direct perception of it. And there's a real liberation there. So this is the technique to sensitize yourself to that constant flow. So good job, Rod. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Martina.
Yeah, I noticed because it's pretty wild and windy here today, I started the practice like just the see, hear, feel was really intense because I feel overstimulated like physically and emotionally with the kind of wildness of the weather. But there was something when you said about focusing on a specific part of the body with the feel. I just was focusing on my heart, and then all of a sudden there was that flow where the hyper stimulation of my physical and emotional state just went like, ah. So it was nice to feel that, like the part of me that had been like all of a sudden just went like, as I focused on feeling in the heart, and then the transition to like a flow in the heart. Yeah.
Beautiful. Sounds like a very tangible reward of cultivating the skill of clarity, to really be present for that feeling of relaxation.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Very, very glad you shared that. And I would offer one more thing with regard to what I mentioned about recycle the reaction, because you said that right now there's a lot of things happening externally, and you noticed that it was bringing up this kind of intensity in your body. So remember, this see, hear, feel is the anything that is happening is grist for the mill. So even that intensity, that thing that you're feeling in your body is OTP, opportunity to practice. So we can become fascinated with that. Where is that? Where is it? Is it coming? Is it going? There's flow available there. So we can soak. It's great. It's wonderful that you had this experience where you're able to soak into something pleasant, something a pleasant window opened, and you were able to go there. But that may not always be the case in our practice. Sometimes the window is through the, as you described, that tense moment. You can even soak into that, find the flow there. There's a liberation and a purification just by bearing down. Make sense?
Yeah. Which I guess that kind of brings up a question for me around, because I've also been doing some somatic experiencing work, which kind of supports listening to the body and making the changes that I need to make so that I can feel at ease in my body. So for example, when things were happening, like the windows were shaking and the blinds were shaking, and I kind of got up to adjust those things, I'm like, do I need to be more equanimous about those things happening and the impact they have on me? Or do I go change those so that I relax?
Yeah, that's for you to decide. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with getting up and closing a window.
Yeah.
Good job.
Thank you.
We'll have time for one more if anyone else has anything on their mind. All right, you guys are all in the flow, I see. So that'll conclude class for this evening. As you know, we always have homework. So this week, your homework is to continue with your practice in life. Now you have a new technique that you can work into your life practice as you see fit, both in the forms of micro dosing or a micro hit or a background practice. And your formal practice, your area of focus this week will be feel flow. So that will be your daily practice for at least 10 minutes. And, you know, as you start to deepen your skills, some of you may feel called to be practicing for longer than 10 minutes. So I encourage you to do that. But you do have to sit for at least 10. So that's the low bar that we're holding ourselves to. And I thank you all for your practice. It's really good that you're doing this. And I'm grateful to share this evening with you. As always, if anyone has any questions about anything at all, you have my email. Just drop me a line. And I will look forward to seeing you all same time next week. All right? Good night.
Thank you.